Good afternoon. It's Friday, March the 6th, and originally I had a different topic in mind in recording today's show, but the way the forecasting worked out and the fact that we've had so much snow of late, we had to make a change late this morning. So the story time segment we planned, you guys will still be getting that in the next installment. Today we'll be doing a New Hampshire Legislative pre-crossover day progress update on 1316, which is the Autism Data Privacy Bill, 1337 in regard to repealing the Autism Council, which we touched on in part number 2, and also House Bill 1593, which would solidify the non-discrimination sections of 504 in regard to disability rights. Like I said on the top here, this was not the original plan we had for today, so I appreciate everyone bearing with us here. Yep. There we go. Brief overview, and we went over this at more length in segment 2. House Bill 1316, inspired by Illinois Executive Order 2025-02 from May 7th, main focus to strengthen protections on data sharing in regard to autism, as outlined in New Hampshire RSA 126A, sections 34 through 38, and the bill, as highlighted in Part 2 and 4, was mostly to address the National Registry, Autism Registry proposal of 2025. What we have for activity so far is it has now reported out of committee as of the 25th. The majority of the committee voted to ITL House Bill 1316, which in layman's terms would effectively kill the measure for that session. The minority recommended ought to pass, and as of today's recording, we don't yet have a full House vote scheduled. That's going to be coming up, that announcement will come out later on this afternoon, March 6th. So please see our, of its own words, Facebook, Blue Sky, and Substack for up-to-date information in regard to the announcements. And then I touched upon some of this in the last presentation and online, just a couple of highlights on the public hearing from the beginning of February. Then I responded very vigorously to Representative Mazur's motion in segment 4. Again, House vote is not yet scheduled. The links to the playback for both the hearing and exec session are listed at the bottom of the slide. So take a moment and check those out when you can. Then we move on to House Bill 1337, and state lead sponsor on that is State Representative Wayne McDonald of Londonderry, and it would be pursuant to repealing RSA 171A subsection 32, as well as amending to remove the seat on the Disability Quality Council, as noted in RSA 171A section 33, and we addressed the entirety of this measure at more length with myself, Representative Lily Foss, and Louis Esposito of Able, New Hampshire back in part 2. Additionally, it would amend RSA 265C, subsection 3, paragraph 2, relative to the involvement of the Council on Autism Spectrum Disorders. Again, we've got the the public hearing playback. Oh, don't think I have it on this one, but that can be found in the same YouTube channel for N1316. The committee recommended to pass by a vote of 10-8. The minority recommended ITL, which again would in effect kill the measure for the session in layman's terms. We're also waiting for a full House vote scheduled on 1337 as well. Again, that announcement could be as soon as Friday afternoon, March the 6th. So refer to Of Its Own Words Facebook and Blue Sky for the updated information regarding those announcements. And then we have a couple of highlights in regards to what was said during the public hearing at the beginning of March. And then quick note on the quick reiteration of what happened with the executive session. And in regard to House Bill 1337 specifically, I wanted to address a couple of things brought up in the exec session. One, recommending repeal of the Autism Council would be a mistake, if you ask me. The reason for that is not just from the standpoint of the services that they provide to the autistic community here in New Hampshire, but also regarding the fact that the committee highlighted multiple times that they had concerns in regard to inefficiencies and organizational difficulties that the council was having in terms of not always having enough attendance for a quorum. From talking with Louis Espito of Able New Hampshire and others, it sounds like they have made significant progress in addressing these issues. The challenge is the majority of the New Hampshire House Health, Human Services, and Elderly Affairs Committee honestly does not want to see that. They want to buy into the national storyline that autistic people shouldn't exist. The council's trying its best to make changes. It's trying its best to make improvements. Unfortunately, the majority of the Health and Human Services Committee of the New Hampshire House has bought into the storyline that autistic people are bad. They're not. And it would be my belief that killing the measure for the session is the correct way to go here. Now, on a broader, and on this slide we've got a couple of comments that I had, which I just highlighted some of them, that the committee's hung up on the administration's story about autism rather than the actual fact. On 1593, and this was brought to my attention very recently, it would strengthen the non-discrimination portions of Section 504 in regard to disability rights. The committee, this is not New Hampshire House Health, Human Services, and Elderly Affairs. This is the Judiciary Committee of the New Hampshire House that heard this one. And they had a committee hearing upon it last Wednesday, February the 25th. And then executive sessioned it on the 27th of February, last Friday. the committee recommended on a vote of 11 to 6 for this measure to be interim studied, citing that they had concerns about the measure itself and in terms of what would happen going forward with the implementation of. The minority of the committee recommend ought to pass, and from talking with Able New Hampshire and folks closer to the circle on the advocacy side, the advice is to push for the ought to pass recommendation in the minority of the committee. And at this point, urge our representatives on 1316 to vote no on ITL and vote for the minority recommendation of ought to pass. On 1337, vote no on the ought to pass and vote for the ITL. On 1593, push for the ought to pass recommendation. What's next is we are waiting for updates on scheduling in regard to a full New Hampshire House vote for 1316, New Hampshire Autism Data Privacy, 1337, repeal of the New Hampshire Autism Council, as well as House Bill 1593, which was just mentioned here a moment ago. All three of these bills, as of the time of this recording, have not been scheduled for a full House vote yet. That announcement could be coming later on in the afternoon on March the 6th. See our Facebook and Blue Sky, both under the keyword of unknown words, for up-to-date details on that. Unknown words so far, for those who have missed it. Part 1, Autism Overview, National Registry proposal from last spring, and overview of misconceptions. On that program, I was joined by my co-producer, Alejandro Urita, and it debuted in December of 2025, and I've got links on the bottom of the slide to the cablecast streaming for Hudson Community TV. And oh, by the way, Unknown Words now has its own YouTube channel, and a link is on the bottom of the slide to that. Part 2, on that particular day in January, I was joined by Louis Espito, Dr. Louis Espito, Executive Director of Able New Hampshire, and State Representative Lily Foss, one of the co-sponsors of House Bill 1316 of Manchester. Again, like with Part 1, the link to HCTV streaming and YouTube are at the bottom of the column. And then in early February, we have the New Hampshire legislative process overview regarding House Bill 1316 and 1317. On that particular afternoon, I was joined by Policy Director of Able New Hampshire, Kristen Evans, and a good buddy of mine, and not that it was not the reason I asked him to join me, congressional candidate Heath Howard, who's running for Congress in Congressional District 1 here in New Hampshire. That episode debuted in February of 2026. And at the bottom of the column, I've got the links to the Hudson Community TV video for it, and also the Unknown Words YouTube. And then our most recent segment, when I was joined by Shauna Hallberg of the New Hampshire Disability Quality Council to discuss the backstory of New Hampshire's Autism Data Privacy Bill. And that debuted a couple weeks ago in the middle to late portion of February 2026. The links are at the bottom of the column, and also teaser for part number 5. And we have that coming up here in the next couple of days. That's actually the segment we're recording right now. And then we've got, let's see, what are we up to here? Credit, part 5 and 6 coming soon. And then we have, in reverse order, would like to, for part number 4, backstory of Autism Data Privacy Bill. Special thanks to Shauna Hallberg for joining us on that. Part number 3, Autism and the New Hampshire Legislative Process Overview. Shout out and thanks to Kristen Evans of Able New Hampshire and State Representative Heath Howard for joining me on that program. Part number 2, Autism New Hampshire Legislative Preview and National Registry. Would like to take a moment to thank Dr. Louis Espito of Able New Hampshire and State Representative Lily Foss for joining me on that. And of course, the program that started all of this journey, of its own words, Introduction, Autism Overview, Countering Misconceptions, and the brief discussion of the National Registry proposal. I would like to thank Alejandro Urita, my co-producer for that program. And a quick note of thanks to 3 gentlemen that honestly don't get enough credit for assisting Alejandro and I in planning and coordination of the series. And that's Michael Johnson, Director of Community Media here in Hudson, and co-production coordinators Mike Pillon and Matt Guerrero, as well as my co-producer Alejandro Urita. This is very much a team effort. For now, the past 5 installments, myself and 1 to 2 other guests have been those that are in front of whatever screen you're watching this on, be it TV streaming, on the computer, on your phone. Doesn't matter. Without it being a team effort, none of this would be possible. And as I mentioned a couple moments ago, we've now expanded our online footprint. So now we're not just on the HCTV website, keyword of its own words. We're now on Facebook with the same keywords. We're on Blue Sky, of its own words, with the handle of its own words, New Hampshire. We've added our own Substack, of its own words, the handle on that one. We're also on YouTube, and this is actually a recommendation of Louis Espito of Able New Hampshire, since we're getting noticed with each additional program that we're making. And frankly, that's absolutely incredible to realize, because 1, it's a very important topic to be continuing to talk about, and 2, it is a very critical topic to understand, because it continues to be in our national discussion. It continues to be in our state level discussions. And if nothing else, there is a lot of misinformation, misconceptions that we've been trying to tackle with this program. And I feel we've done exactly that. And also we need to very clearly understand the historical ramifications of what we're being presented with in our current environment, both state level and nationally. Because as history shows, if left unchecked, the end is very, very dark and very, very serious. The whole reason I have started this program is an attempt to educate people and get enough people to realize what's at stake, so we stop the current trajectory we are on nationally and at the state level before it's too late. before it gets out of hand. And then we have part number 6 coming up probably in the next couple of weeks here. And that's actually going to be when we wind up showcasing the storytelling segment that was originally planned for this afternoon. And I mean, we had to change last minute here, and I feel it's important to squeeze in the legislative update since we had the opportunity to. And given the fact that the series of its own words has grown so much already, and it's gotten more and more attention as we've gone through the first portion of 2026. For those who don't know me already, my name is Ian Hounds. I am one of the hosts and co-producers of His Own Words on Hudson Community TV. His Own Words' purpose is to encourage inclusion, acceptance of those who are autistic. This program is meant to uplift autism awareness through education and storytelling. Now, originally, it was going to be about my story. The more we've dug into it, right after the second portion, I was talking with the guest that I had on at that time, Dr. Lewis Speechel of Able, New Hampshire, and some of the team here at Hudson Community TV. And we realized that we needed to magnify the scope of this a little bit more, to not just make it about me, but to make it about those who are like me, those who have different backgrounds within the advocacy and decision-making arena, to showcase their story as well. Now, for those who don't know, originally I came up with His Own Words as an attempt to expand the audience that I'm reaching out to in uplifting autism awareness, and to address some of the misconceptions that were presented in misconceptions and lack of rebuttal that was presented right after Secretary Kennedy announced an autism national registry last spring. The concept for His Own Words is based around a speech that I gave at No Kings rallies in June and October at the New Hampshire State House in Concord. On the first case, I shared opposition to the National Autism Registry and offered a warning that at that point in June last year, I believed that we were beginning down a slippery slope. Certainly history tells us that. During the summer and fall of last year, Alejandro and I sat down and began brainstorming and planning out what you now see in front of you of His Own Words, a public access segment on Hudson Community TV. We're 5 installments in already. Originally, we were only planning 2, so already this has grown much larger than either of us could have anticipated. Yet, and very much welcome. In October of last year, I returned to the New Hampshire State House in Concord to not just reiterate my opposition for the Autism Registry, but also to offer a counter-argument to the beginnings of the misinformation and misrepresentation that we had seen about autism last summer and fall. And honestly, the one thing that I could not have foreseen or predicted is the amount of attention and growth that His Own Words has seen in just a few months. And honestly, with everything that's going on, it's the main thing that keeps me going. It's the main thing that inspires me to keep doing these segments for all of you. In November, my co-producer, Alejandro, Eureka, and I recorded the first installment of His Own Words, and that was the introduction to the series and overview that we had done, which debuted early in December of last year. In January of this year, I sat down with Dr. Louis Espito, Executive Director of ABLE New Hampshire, and Representative Lily Foss of Manchester, and on that day we did a deeper dive into the New Hampshire legislative session that we're currently in, specific to, at least at that time, the Autism Data Privacy Bill, House Bill 1316, and House Bill 1337 relative to repealing the New Hampshire Autism Council. As well as discussing our concerns about what a national autism registry would mean. And I strongly recommend that y'all go back and watch part 2 if that's something that's of interest to you. At the beginning of February, I had the opportunity to sit down with the Policy Director of ABLE New Hampshire, Kristen Evans, and State Representative Heath Howard. And we discussed an overview of the New Hampshire legislative process in regard to House Bill 1316. And also, he's mentioned that he had put forth a, not really a direct copycat, but a related legislative measure similar to House Bill 1316 in regard to overall medical data privacy, House Bill 1317, which I will post this on Facebook and Blue Sky a little bit later on, but as I understand it, House Bill 1317 was tabled by the New Hampshire House yesterday, March the 5th, during their full session, which is not good news, but it's not bad news either. It opens the door for it to be brought back up later in the session. That being said, with House Bill 1316 focusing about autism data, it presents an opportunity for 1316 to also be tabled also, and also opens the door for it to be brought back up later on in the session. And then just a couple of weeks ago, Shauna Hallberg and I, and Shauna is a leading advocate behind the New Hampshire Autism Data Privacy Bill, had the first of what's going to be at least two more story time type of segments, and that was originally what we were hoping for today, but the weather had other ideas. And as we sit here early in March of 2026, the New Hampshire legislative session very much underway, I honestly believe that this is a topic that we really should very much keep in the spotlight. And I want to state my gratitude, not just for my co-producer Alejandro, the guest panelists that I've had on in installments 1 through 4, but also the team here at New Hampshire Community TV for being so accommodating, so willing to assist us in coordinating around what has been an absolutely snowy winter and around everybody's absolutely chaotic schedules. And as we look toward installment number 6, 7, and however many, I am motivated and grateful to see not just what Of Its Own Words already is as a series, but the direction it's going to be developing into. And for the most up-to-date information, updates in between the shows, I would encourage everyone to not just check us out on the HCTV Cablecast streaming site, but also on Facebook, Blue Sky, Substack, and the Of His Own Word YouTube channel. And as long as the weather cooperates, I would hope that with part number 6 we'll be back more on schedule. And I appreciate everybody taking time today to watch the recording. Have a great afternoon. Thanks.